About 2 months ago, I was getting everything ready to leave for college. I enrolled in all my classes, I completed my orientation course, and basically had everything ready for when I had to go. It should have been a good feeling, but I just kind of felt empty. I was all prepared to head off into this new chapter in my life, and I didn't feel anything. I didn't really feel like making videos at this time either, and the thought of doing so didn't really give me any joy. And all the time I did have was wasted just waiting for my friends to join calls, with nothing else going on. In order to try to combat this feeling of emptiness, I turned to video games to fill the void. So I booted up Steam and looked through the store to find something to play. And that's when I came across a game that would change my life forever. Until Then is a 2D and 3D side-scrolling visual novel developed by Polychroma Games and created by Mickole, Klein, Nulud. The game takes place in the Philippines and follows a young teenager named Mark Borja as he navigates everyday life while his parents are forced to work overseas after the events of the Ruling, a global catastrophe that hit the world a year prior. Throughout the game, you follow Mark's journey and watch him grow as he meets new friends, tries new things, and faces both old and new struggles. Now, all I've really given you is a basic synopsis of the game. But I think what you really want to hear is what I think of it, and whether or not it's good. Well, let's just say... This game made me cry 3 different times. I can confidently say that Until Then has one of the best stories I've ever played. Everything about this game, from the environments, the music, the comedy, the drama, and the designs of every area just oozes charm and beauty. The developers themselves specifically stated that they wanted to focus on Filipino representation, and although I am Filipino, I know nothing of the culture. Yeah, I'm a fraud. But from what I've heard from other Filipino players and content creators, this game captures the environments of the Philippines very well. This game also has a ton of minigames to keep you entertained throughout the story, and if you don't believe me, they got the carnival minigames, the bicycle minigame, the last minute cramming video game, the group chat minigame, and even the doom scrolling minigame. Yeah, this game is peak. But out of everything this game has to offer, my favorite thing about it is the characters. Every single character, even the minor ones, have so much charm, with each of them standing out in their own different, unique, and interesting way. But out of every character this game has to offer, my favorite would have to be Cathy Portillo. Let's start off with the basics. Who is Cath? Well, she's a lot of things. She's the best friend and classmate of the game's protagonist, Mark Borja. Cath is also optimistic, supportive, girl-loving, fun-loving, hopelessly in love, caring, and a lot more. There's a lot of reasons why I could call her my favorite. It could be because of how much chemistry she has with Mark, with them having arguably the best chemistry out of any characters in the game. It could also be that she reminds me so much of my own best friend in real life. But I think what truly makes her my favorite character and Until Then is what she came to realize about her life, and through watching her journey, she made me realize something about my own life as well, which caused her to not only be one of my favorite characters in Until Then, but in any game I've ever played. But in order to get to that point, we're gonna have to go through her history within the game. Now is the time for me to warn you all about spoilers for the first part of Until Then. This game is genuinely incredible, and if you want to play it for yourself, go right ahead. It's actually extremely underrated and deserves a lot more love. Also, this will not be an entire recap of the first part of the game. I will only be covering Cathy's story and giving context to certain scenes if needed. After telling her story, I'll be going over what she means to me and why I love her character so much. Also, I'm admittedly not done with the game yet, so there could be scenes later on that might contradict things that I've stated, but that's alright. Anyways, without further ado, let's dive into Catherine's history and why she's so amazing to me. The first time we see Cath in-game is in class, watching Mark and his group present a report on the novel Crime and Punishment, which was completed entirely on the day it was due, like an hour before the class, hence the cramming minigame. After he initially fumbles but ultimately succeeds in giving his presentation, she teases him about his mistake, which he quickly shoots back at, teasing her about a boy that she used to like named Jaggy Navarro, which she quickly deflects, stating that her one true love is their class president Luis Orduña. Right after their first interaction, it's clear that Mark and Cathy are close. The way they tease and banter with each other is so seamless and natural. I don't even think they explicitly state that they're best friends, it's just made clear from their chemistry alone. Anyways, after these two banter back and forth, their third friend, Rydell Gonzalez, arrives, and the three talk about how Rydell's finally acquired funding to direct a short film, new transfer students come into their school, and complain about how Rydell wasn't in their class this year. This first introduction establishes Mark, Cathy, and Rydell's connection with one another, showing off how these three have been friends for a very long time. It's a really solid first introduction for Cathy, but it only gets better from here. Way better. The next time we see Cath is when she and Mark meet up at Legally Distinct 7-Eleven. When the two initially meet up, Cathy can be seen wearing pajamas. Outside. At the Legally Distinct 7-Eleven. Which is pretty weird, but according to her, Mark's the silly one because his lifestyle's too dull to see her genius. After a brief back and forth, the two begin stalking the new transfer students on Instagram. After a few minutes of stalking, Cathy gets a phone call from her mom. And although you can't hear what she's saying, it's obvious that Cath snuck out of the house and that her mom is pissed. After Mark tries to persuade her to go home, Cath tells him that she already feels at home with him. After Cathy says this, she and Mark notice that it's starting to rain, which was weird considering the forecast that week said nothing about rain. After realizing it was raining, Cathy gets up and starts walking towards the street, with Mark trying to grab her hand to stop her and missing. After seeing Cath walk straight into the rain, he desperately looks around for something to shield her from it, eventually finding a watermelon patterned umbrella. After he shields both of them from the rain, he questions why she decided to stand in it, asking if she showered at home, with Cath responding that she did, but the water at home stinks and that she's sick of it. Mark then asks why she's so impressed by it, and it's then revealed by Cath that she's a pluviophile, someone who loves rain. She then tells Mark to hold out his hand, which the both of them do, and while Cathy revels in the feeling of the raindrops sliding across her wrist, Mark just can't understand why she loves it so much, simply asking her where she got this weird kink from. Despite not understanding, both of them share a laugh about it. As they continue to stand under the rain, Cathy asks Mark if he knows what happens to butterflies when they try to fly in the rain, with Mark answering that they don't. Cath confirms this, stating that they're powerless against such a powerful force, and if they don't hide and find shelter, they end up tattered. Or even die. After bantering back and forth some more, Mark then asks if Rydell was coming, with Cathy sadly stating that exams won't let him go out, and that he was missing yet another hangout. Mark then responds that if Rydell did show up, the three of them would just push each other out of the umbrella, and that Rydell's face would fall flat in a puddle. As the two continue chatting, Cath reaches out and grabs onto his arm, telling Mark that if he and Rydell ever ran away from her, she would never forgive them, with Mark responding that on behalf of him and Rydell, copy that, princess. After hearing this, Cath then gently leans her head on his shoulder, content with his answer. Despite the tender moment, Mark then gets a serious look on his face, his eyes darting towards Cath and the other way over and over, with him finally sporting a determined look on his face as the screen cuts to black, ending the first chapter. After covering everything about this first portion of the game, we now know quite a bit about Cath and her character. We know that despite loving to tease her best friends Mark and Rydell, she has a deep love for them both, with her considering being with Mark her home and her sadness about Rydell missing yet another one of their group hangouts. She also doesn't want to be left behind by her friends. We know that she adores the rain, she doesn't like being home, she seemingly has a tense relationship with her mom, and that she really likes girls despite her friends making fun of her for having a former crush on a boy named Jaggy. Her intense love towards her friends is something I relate to so much, and her desire not to be left behind is something I struggle with every day of my life. It hit especially hard for me, as it was around the time a lot of my own friends were going off to college, and I knew it was inevitable that some of us would just drift away. But despite my acceptance of that, the fear of being left behind by the people you feel love towards hurts a lot, and seeing the same fears I have in a video game character of all things is so surreal to me. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest, the end of the first chapter not only made me completely fall in love with Cathy's character, but the entire game in general. But this is only the beginning, so let's keep moving forward. At the start of this chapter, Mark is seen exhaustedly walking into his classroom with the sky outside still dark. After he grabs his graded exam papers and takes a seat at his desk, he begins to play an air piano, trying to remember a song that his mother used to play for him on her own piano. As he plays his imaginary piano, Kath walks into the classroom as chipper and bright as ever, and witnesses Mark moving his fingers around like a lunatic. After giving him a massive heart attack, it's revealed that the reason Mark woke up so early is because Kath asked him to, since she wanted him to be a backup plan just in case her attempts to befriend and eventually date the new transfer student Kate Corpus fail. With Kathy's reason for getting up so early being that transfer students always show up to class early. As Kath grabs her own exam papers, Mark tells her that his above average scores have to be a fluke and that either the exams were too easy or the teachers were too forgiving. With Kath disregarding this and telling Mark that there's always been a secret genius inside of his head, and that it was beginning to rise from its eternal slumber like the glorious phoenix. As the two talk about their test scores, their newest transfer student, Kate, enters the room. Kathy has Mark sit back and watch as she claims that when she befriends her, they'll eventually watch the stars together and do whatever couples do together in movies. Her attempts go less than adequate, and after her complete and utter failure, Kath forces Mark to try, and although he gets a bit further than her, Kate really isn't open to him either. After this little plan goes up in flames, Kathy doesn't really appear in this chapter for a while. It isn't until a day later when Mark's eating dinner alone that he takes out his phone and texts her. He tells her about how he was forced to help a girl he quite literally ran into with her art project after he destroyed it. That girl was the other transfer student, Nicole Laxkamana. After telling Kathy what happened, she comments on how it's kinda surprising that Mark was the one who initiated their conversation instead of her, and tells him not to forget about the trip she, him, and Rydell were supposed to take together. To which Mark responds, "What trip?" It turns out Kath has been pushing Mark and Rydell to go with her to the fair, something the three of them used to go to together. She also wants to use the trip as a way of having some fun with Rydell before he leaves to direct his short film, to which Mark agrees to. After he finishes dinner and messaging Kath, he heads over to his bedroom. On the way there, he stumbles across two things in his living room: an envelope with pictures of his time at the mall with Kathy and Rydell, and a CD with 1968 pop music, which was gifted to him by Kathy on his 13th birthday. As Mark looks through the envelope full of pictures, the events of that time with his friends come back to him. The three of them can be seen doing all sorts of shenanigans together, with trophies from their hangout being present within the envelope as well. And at the end of that stack of photos laid a note. The note read, "Until then, love, Kathy." After looking through the photos, Mark questions how they got here and heads off to his room. As he sits down at his piano, he remembers the time he first set it up with Kath. After they finish setting it up, Kath remarks how she never knew Mark had a piano, with him responding that it was his mom's and that she used to play as a hobby. When asked by Kath why his mom stopped, Mark tells her that she got busy. Although this chapter doesn't have too much Kath in it, it serves as a build-up for what happens next. After a very traumatic hospital visit, Mark meets up with Kathy at the fair. While she's upbeat and excited about spending time with her friends, Mark's mental state seems to be a little unstable. After a little bit of chatting, Kath spots Rydell walking towards them and is ecstatic to see her friend, only for her to realize that he's distracted on his phone talking to his producers. While the two wait for him to finish his phone call, Kath tries reminiscing with Mark about the times they had at the fair, with Mark hardly remembering any of it as his mental state continues to dip, resulting in him eventually walking away from his friends in order to try and calm down. With Mark gone, Kath then tries to talk to Rydell about all the fun they're gonna have, but all Rydell can think about is how excited he is to direct a short film. As Kath asks Rydell to go check on Mark, she makes a comment on how she saw him playing an imaginary piano, worrying that he might have gone insane. Surprisingly, Rydell tells her that Mark's imaginary piano playing is really clever, and that he sometimes pretends to take photos with an imaginary camera, saying that it was called dedication. As he walks over to check on Mark, Kath asks him if he lost his mind too, with Rydell responding, "Probably." Standing alone, Kath watches on as her two closest friends walk away from her, a concerning look growing on her face. As Mark and Rydell talk, Kath walks up to them wearing cat ears, holding two more in her hands. While Mark and Rydell are hesitant about wearing them, eventually they cave in and all three friends begin exploring the fair together, sporting cat ears, with Kathy stating that if they get embarrassed, at least they'll all be embarrassed together. As the three try to play games and have a good time, Mark's mental state continues deteriorating, causing him to mess up on every game they play. Rydell also seems to be messing up every game he plays as well, acting distracted most of the time while playing. After failing to win a few carnival games, the three of them sit down for a break. As the three of them sit, Kath comments on how it's kind of amazing that they make the fair look almost the same every single year, with the same games, rides, and prizes, admiring their consistency as a place where nothing really changes. As she says this, she looks over at Rydell sadly, watching him distractedly text an unknown person. As she and Mark talk about fair rides, one of the people Rydell's working with appears, telling him that their shuttle was ready to go. After hearing this, Rydell excitedly gets up and the two of them leave. As Rydell leaves, Mark's mental state continues dropping, causing him to get up and take a walk. As Kath sits alone, she looks down at the bench where he was sitting and realizes that Rydell left his cat ears behind. As Mark walks around the fair, he runs into Nicole, the transfer student he spent all day with after ruining her art project. As the two of them spend time together, Mark's mind begins to settle, and as they sit together on the fair's dock, Kath starts looking for him. As she looks around the fair, she spots Mark and Nicole sitting side by side on the dock laughing together. As she watches on alone, she grips Rydell's cat ears tightly, her whole hand shaking until she lets it go limp, walking away and leaving the two of them to spend time at the fair together. After the fair, Mark walks back to his house only to find Kath already at his front gate waiting for him. Mark realizes that he left Kath all by herself and quickly apologizes, with her shrugging it off and asking Mark if he was ready to race. He suggests that they play another video game, but Kath tells him that she can smell the luck and spirit all over him, saying that this might be the day that Mark finally beats her, with Mark retorting that all she can smell is the trash, which he's been actually taking out for a change. As he walks into the house, Kath thinks about his words and follows him inside. Right before the two of them start playing, Mark questions why Kath wanted to hang out, since it was a bit late. Kath responds that the reason she wants to hang out is because she doesn't want to eat what her parents made, saying that it was disgusting. When Mark asks what they were making, she tells him that it's sardines. As she begs Mark to make her something, he responds that he too will be making sardines for dinner, much to Kath's annoyance. When he asks if she still wants to hang out, she responds that food wasn't the only reason she came over. She also wanted to beat him at the racing game the two of them play together. Before they eat, Mark tells her that there was something he wanted to show her. As Mark prepares dinner, he stops to text Nicole with a big smile on his face. Kath watches on, only speaking up after a few minutes to ask him what he wanted to show her. As Mark takes Kath to his room, he tells her that he's gonna try and join the school's piano club to improve, stating that he's tried everything and that this was the last option. As he says this, Kath gets a sad look on her face, asking if he was sure about this piano hobby, with Mark confirming that he was. After hearing his confirmation, her sadness turns into a wide grin, telling Mark that he's got this. When Mark asks her how she can be so sure, she tells him that if Rydell can reach his goals, so can he, and that she'll be with him on his journey to improve, but only because she knows how much of a klutz he can be. As Mark begins to practice playing piano in front of her, Cathy looks at him smiling, telling him that he's gonna go places, with Mark responding back that it was just a hobby, with Kath telling him that Rydell used to say the same thing as well. After he finishes practicing, the two of them begin eating dinner. As the two eat, Cathy comments on the nice and quiet atmosphere. Mark is confused by this, saying that their neighborhood is usually really quiet at night. Kath tells him that it isn't really quiet for her when she has, well, stupid neighbors. As they continue eating, Mark talks to her about Nicole, telling Cathy that he couldn't explain it, but although things at the fair never really change, being with her made it feel all new. After they finish eating their dinner, the two of them head to the living room and begin playing their racing game. As the two play, it's quite obvious that Kath is leagues above Mark in terms of skill, and after beating him once, she asks if he's still dead set on improving despite their skill difference, to which Mark confirms. Kath then tells Mark that this is going to be their last game together. As the two of them reach the final lap of the race, things aren't looking very good for Mark, and as they play, Cathy looks over at Mark, smiling. She asks him if he thinks she's good at this game, with Mark telling her that she didn't have to rub it in. Kath tells Mark that she always saw herself being a racer or a sprinter in the future, someone who would always go first in a way, someone who would be ahead of everyone. After hearing her say this, Mark asks her why not become one of those things. She's already a natural at this game. Kath then tells him that if only life was as easy as this game, maybe she'd believe him. As Mark questions how she can call this game easy, Cathy tells him that it'll get easier for him. She knows it will, and that he's trying his best. As the race continues, Kath ponders about her goals, thinking about what she said, and after giving it some thought, she begins to focus on the game once more, uttering out the words, "It's time." Her focused expression turning into one of relaxation. As her race reaches its dramatic climax, Kath suddenly messes up a crucial drift, allowing for Mark to pull ahead and finally beat Kath in a race. As Mark gets up and runs through the living room cheering, she looks at him with a smile on her face. After this, Mark continues practicing his piano playing skills in preparation for club tryouts. As he meets other members of this club, Cathy's true to her word and stays by Mark's side as he improves, but it's clear that she feels out of place. After this, Cathy isn't really seen too much during this chapter, as the focus of the narrative shifts towards Mark and Nicole. But overall, we gained a lot more insight into Kath's character in this chapter. We know that she's a natural at racing games, she wants to be someone who runs ahead of everyone else, she has a tense relationship with change, and that she wants her friends to succeed in their dreams. Overall, this chapter made me love Kath even more than I already did. But would you believe that she gets even better going forward? You'll see. The chapter opens up with Mark walking into the school cafeteria and seeing Kath and their other friend, Ryan Soriano, working on math together. As Mark approaches them, Ryan comments on how much time he's been spending with Nicole, which causes Kath to start looking uncomfortable. After a few minutes of talking, Kath tells Ryan to focus as the two of them need to finish up their homework. Before they could continue, however, Ryan was called for basketball and quickly leaves. After Ryan leaves the cafeteria, Mark asks Cathy if she still needs to finish the homework too, with her responding that she can take her time with it. As the two sit in silence for a bit, Kath asks him if he's in the cafeteria for any other reason, with Mark responding that he was supposed to meet up with their class president, Louise. She then asks if it's to go over the Christmas party plans, to which Mark hastily confirms, stating that he thinks all the games are just going to be the same as last year. After hearing this, Kath questions who'd really want anything to change anyway, with Mark surprisingly telling her that he wouldn't. After hearing this, Mark questions her on whether or not they were still talking about Christmas games. After some more silence, Mark asks Cathy if she has a dress for prom, to which she responds no. She then tells Mark that it's not having a dress she's worried about. She's more worried about the fact that she can't find a girl to go with her. Mark then tells her that she can always go with Jaggy, something she quickly shoots down. Mark tells her that he doesn't have an outfit either, and the two make plans to go shopping together at the mall. Kath then asks Mark if he's going to take Nicole to the dance, with Mark questioning if she'd even say yes. She then tells him that whatever he says or does, good luck, which surprises Mark, to which Kath replies that he underestimates his dear friend and walks off. When the two of them meet up and begin shopping together, Kath gets a call from her parents. Like before, nothing they say can be heard, but we can hear Kath telling her parents that she won't be out late again and that she remembers her budget. As the two continue to look around for clothes, Kath finds something she really likes but refuses to try it on. When Mark asks her why she doesn't try it on, Kath tells him that she was looking for something more long-sleeved. As the two continue looking, Kath complains that none of the dresses are long-sleeved, to which Mark questions why they have to be. She then tells him that she just wants to be a goddess with beautiful and glorious sleeves. After not finding anything they like, the two continue exploring the mall. As they walk around, they find an arts and crafts store, with Cathy suggesting that maybe she can make a collage from all the photos of her, Mark, and Rydell together, with Mark telling her that there's no way Rydell would let her cut up his photos. After hearing this, the two begin to reminisce about their friend, before heading back to exploring the mall. The two of them then head to a music store, with Mark questioning if Kath wants to pick up piano like him, with Kath responding that it's not the instrument for her. While they talk in front of the store, she gets a phone call to which she declines, claiming that it was a scammer. Kath then takes interest in a guitar, suggesting that she, Mark, and Rydell could make a band together, throwing out stupid yet charming band names that Rydell would hate. As the two stare at the instruments, Kath comments that she hasn't found anything yet, with Mark stating that he sort of managed to find something. Kath then tells him that he's right, but she's unsure about the guitar, telling him that it just doesn't feel like her. Confused, Mark tells her he was talking about something for prom, to which she hastily suggests that they keep going. As they continue to the mall, they come across a shut-down arcade, which was the same arcade from the pictures of Mark, Cathy, and Rydell's trip to the mall in Chapter 2. After coming across the shutdown arcade, the two bow their heads and pay their respects before moving on. Mark and Cathy then come across a new store that sells baking supplies and cookies. Both of them end up buying something here, with Mark purchasing cookies for Nicole and Kath buying baking tools. As the two talk about what they're gonna do with the stuff they bought, the lady at the cash register asks them if they're gonna see the fireworks show that's gonna start in 30 minutes. Upon hearing this, Kath's eyes just light up, begging Mark to go see it with her. Mark asks if it's such a good idea, telling her that they've already stayed out later than expected and that her parents were expecting her home. Kath tells him not to worry about it, and the two go outside to watch the show. As the two wait for the show to start, Kath gushes to Mark about her love for fireworks, telling him about how fleeting bursts of light in the dark sky makes you stop thinking about all your worries. As the duo banter together, they spot 3 kids across the street playing together and having fun. After seeing this, Kath tells Mark that she misses Rydell. Mark responds that he does too, but is happy that he's thriving. Kath then questions if the kids across the street are gonna grow up as fast as they did, saying that they should cherish it while it lasts. All the free time in the world, not worrying about the big things, and not worrying about what comes next. As Mark and Cathy watch 2 of the kids say goodbye to the other, Kath comments on what a wild year it's been, with Rydell getting his big break and Mark's relationship with Nicole. Something I didn't notice before on my first playthrough was that when they were watching 2 of the kids leave, Mark's attention was focused on the 1 kid left alone, while Kath was focused on the 2 kids that were leaving. Suddenly, Mark gets a message from Cathy's brother, Andrew, asking him if he's seen Cathy, telling him that their mom was really worried. After relaying this information back to Cathy, she begs Mark not to respond, telling him that she doesn't want to go home yet. Depending on whether or not Mark does it, the duo continue to wait for the fireworks. Suddenly, rain begins falling from the sky, much to Cathy's dismay. Because of the rain, the fireworks show was forced to cancel, with Cathy being extremely upset about this, saying that it was supposed to be perfect. After hearing how distraught she was, Mark quickly grabbed her arm and outstretched it towards the rain, allowing for the drops to fall on her hand. She's shocked that Mark remembers how much she loves feeling the rain on her hand, with Mark telling her that of course he'd remember. As the two hold their arms out in the rain, Mark apologizes to Cathy for not being able to find her a dress, with her reassuring him that it's alright and there's more important things than finding a dress. The two then begin talking about their families, with Mark's not coming home for Christmas and Kath's being the same old, same old. He then comments on how he never really sees her parents. She tells him that they like to be busy and they aren't exactly fans of other people, laughing about how she was the only member of her family that could engage with society. After their arms get tired, Kath looks at Mark and tells him that although both of them have been really busy, he could always count on her to be at his side. Mark tells her that he knows and apologizes for being so busy with piano. Kath tells him not to apologize and just to promise that he'll eventually become really good at it, because that's all she wants in the end. After hearing this, Mark begins gushing to Kath about how much fun he's having practicing and improving, with her smiling at him and saying that she's glad to see him like this, with Mark asking like what, to which Kath looks at him with the biggest smile on her face and utters a single word: happy. The duo's moment is cut short, however, by Kath's brother arriving and taking her away, scolding her that she should have been home hours ago, and as the two siblings leave, Mark realizes that she left behind the cookie cutter that she bought. After finishing up some last-minute practice, Mark heads to school for the piano recital. As he prepares to play, he spots Kath in the audience, texting someone with a big smile on her face. After Mark questions Kath on who's got her smiling like that, she angrily tells him that it's nothing, saying that she was just looking at a funny cat video. After Mark finishes his performance, Kath looks at him with joy in her eyes, saying how the secret genius inside his noggin had finally been awakened. Before Mark can say anything, he noticed another bandage on Cathy's face, to which he asks her about. After handing Mark the cookies she baked, Kath tells him that it was nothing more than a baking accident. After the recital comes to a close, Mark and Nicole decide to take the bus to Nicole's old hometown to uncover some answers about the death of her best friend. As the two ride the bus, Mark gets multiple texts from Kath and Sophia Rubio, the best friend of their class president Luis. From both their texts, it's heavily implied that the two of them like one another romantically. After Mark and Nicole's trip results in a falling out, Mark returns home and is forced to accept the truth about his family, one that he's been in denial about for years. It's revealed that this entire time, Mark's mom has been dead and that he's been lying to everyone about her being too busy with work to come home. As Mark forces himself to wake up and accept the truth about his mother, he gets a knock at the door. As tears stream down Mark's face, he tells his best friend that he was a liar. As Mark embraces Kath, hearing the pain and the grief in his voice, she hugs him back, telling him that he can talk to her all about it. Mark opens up to Cathy about the day his parents were supposed to come home. The plane she was taking suddenly went missing. Although Mark and his father tried everything to locate her, the events of the ruling caused the authorities to shift their efforts into fixing that instead of the search for his mother. And although the rest of the world seemed to keep moving forward, Mark and his father stayed put, trying desperately every day to try and find a trace of her. Eventually, that hope turned into stubbornness, and for the longest time afterward, both Mark and his father refused to admit she was gone for good. Mark had lied to everyone, even his closest friends, about everything that had happened, telling them all that her flight just got delayed. But most importantly, he was lying to himself. The reason he picked up playing piano in the first place was because he thought if he learned how to play, it would still feel like she was with him. But he reached a breaking point. After everything that he went through, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. After spilling everything to Kath, he knew he couldn't keep it in, and after she left, he ended up telling Nicole while simultaneously asking her to prom as well. After such an emotionally raw scene, the next time we see Kath is on prom day. As Mark searches around the dance floor for Nicole, he bumps into Cathy, donning an incredible butterfly-themed dress and headband, with beautiful green patterns all around it as well. While waiting for Nicole, the two end up waiting in line together for their photo to be taken. As they wait in line, Kath tells Mark that there's something that she wants to tell him, something important, and asks him to promise that he'll save his last dance for her, with Mark agreeing. The two then spend the night dancing with their friends, having fun, with the duo both getting to dance with the person they like. As the night continues, Mark remembers that he promised to save his last dance for Cathy, and when he turns around to fulfill his promise, she's nowhere in sight. Mark and his friends desperately search around for her, but she appears to have left the dance entirely. As they continue searching, the principal makes an announcement, stating that Cathy Portillo needs to come to the side of the stage immediately. As she makes the announcement, Cathy's parents stand right next to her, an angry expression plastered on both of their faces. Realizing that Cathy has completely left the area, Mark and his friends run outside, finding Cathy's butterfly headband on the floor. After seeing this, Mark takes off running, desperate to find his best friend. You see, before the dance, Mark and his class president Luis did some investigating about the rain, as its occurrence was deemed supernatural by Luis, and it was theorized that whenever it began to rain, people who were alone would end up disappearing. Mark began running as fast as he could, not stopping for even a second as he spots more and more of Kath's discarded accessories. As he runs, he begins to hear his mother's voice telling him to keep going. Mark continues running, the voice of his mother urging him to keep on moving. He continues to run and run and run until eventually he can't run anymore, falling onto the wet concrete. He was exhausted. He couldn't keep going. He had to give up. But then he saw her, standing underneath a bus stop across the street with tears in her eyes, her arm outstretched in the rain, letting the drops hit her hand and slide down her wrist. The bandages that once stuck to her face were gone, revealing two large scars. Her dress was completely ruined, with the sleeves completely shredded, showing countless bruises across her arms and legs. As Mark shouts her name, she turns around, her eyes full of tears. After seeing him, Kath's sadness turned to joy, ecstatic that he came to find her for their last dance together. As the two ran towards each other, Their overwhelming emotions made them unable to notice a massive truck flying towards her, and after everything Mark did to find her, after pushing himself to his absolute limit to keep going, it was all taken away in an instant. As the truck barrels closer and closer towards Cathy, Mark thinks to himself about what she once told him about butterflies in the rain, that if they have no place to hide, they tatter. Or even... The scene fades back into a funeral service. As Mark walks along the path, he stops and speaks to his friends about Cathy, each of them apologizing to him about what happened. As he stares at her memorial, he questions if anyone truly knew her. Mark even wonders if he truly knew her. After a cold chat with Cathy's parents, her brother hands Mark a CD, saying that it was found on her body and it was addressed to him. As Mark takes the CD, he comments that she finally found music that he liked. He then walks up to the casket where Cathy lays still, with Rydell already standing there. As he congratulates Rydell on his short film, he asks Mark to attend the private screening with him, apologizing for his loss. Finally, as he stands before his best friend's coffin, the picture of her on top of it staring back at him as well, he looks at her face one last time. He cries to himself, apologizing to her, wishing he did better before breaking down, repeating to himself that he didn't know what he wished he did differently. Finally, he looks back up one last time at his best friend's face, saying that all he wished for at that moment was for her to be here. As the screen cuts to black, the scene opens up on Rydell and Mark reaching the end of Rydell's short film. As the credits roll, Rydell tells Mark that he wished Cath could have been around to see this. After hearing that, Mark turns to him and tells him that he wasn't even around this year. Rydell responds that he was gone this year to make this film, to which Mark retorts, for what? His anger growing, Rydell tells Mark that this entire film was for Mark and Cath. With Mark's anger growing as well, he tells Rydell that he couldn't even text them a Merry Christmas. Rydell counters this by telling Mark that he was busy as well, with Mark saying that at least he was around. With his anger reaching a boiling point, Rydell asks Mark, was it enough? As Mark hears this, his anger turns into grief as he looks down and tells Rydell that no, none of it was. As Rydell sees Mark's sadness, his anger subsides, apologizing as the two friends stare at the screen while the credits roll. Years have passed, and Mark prepares to move out of his old home with Nicole. After he finishes talking to someone on the phone, Mark takes a look around his soon-to-be former home and looks down at one of the many boxes holding his old stuff. Within the box were photos of his old friends, one of Rydell's movies, an old gaming console, and the CD that was given to him by Cath after she died, which Mark had never opened. After playing the CD, he begins listening to each track one by one until suddenly he stumbles upon an extra track that was simply labeled Untitled. As Mark listens, he begins to hear a familiar voice. It's Cath's. Mark's eyes widen in shock as the track continues to play. Cath says that just in case she was too chicken to tell Mark at prom, she decided to record what she wanted to tell him on a CD just in case. She tells him that after Mark opened up to her about his mother that night, Cath felt like she should do the same. Things are rough at home. My parents are really strict and angry, and I'm not good. Not good enough for them. They've always been, I didn't know how to tell you. I tried so hard to get away from it. To stay home less and spend more time with you guys. But it's hard, Mark. And you and Rydell got busy this year. Which is fine, it's great. You both found something you love doing. Honestly, I was jealous at first. I felt a little left behind. I was afraid of losing Rydell and I thought if I lost you too, I don't know. At one point, I was even wishing that you would fail. But that didn't feel right. I felt sick and guilty. But Mark, when I saw the passion shining in your eyes, I knew I couldn't take that away from you. I knew I had to deal with my own selfishness. You guys worked so hard and I wanted to shine too. You guys, you inspired me. Yeah, I'm going soft on you. Yuck. But now... I want to run like you. I want to do something I love. I want to work hard for it. I want to live my life. I want you to see my eyes shine too. Even though my parents don't want me. I want to run with you guys. Us, all together. I want to run as fast as I can. Into the light. I want to be happy. I want us to be happy. So let's all run to a bright future together, okay? She then goes into detail about what she thinks each and every one of her friends will be doing in the future, with her believing that each and every one of them will go off and do something incredible. And then she gets to her own future. And me? Who knows? Maybe this baking thing will take off. Or maybe I'll discover something else. We'll see. Well, whatever that might be, I don't want to get left behind now. So I'll run with you guys. I'm going to join you there. In the light. We'll do this together, okay? Until then. How do I stop this? Stop button, stop button. Can't find it. As the track ends, Mark solemnly looks at the box once again, spotting the racing game that he and Kath used to play together, taking it out and booting it up for one last race. As Mark begins the race, Kath's last played game races against him as well, and much like before, Kath easily gets ahead of everyone, leaving Mark in the dust, until she just stops going forward, her car missing the crucial drift as it begins going backwards, allowing Mark to pull ahead and win. As Mark watches Kath's car, he realized what she was doing. Something he couldn't see when they were kids because he was so occupied with finally beating her. He finally understood. She let him get ahead. She let go of her fear of being abandoned, her jealousy, her selfishness, all of it. Although she had her own problems at home, she realized that trying to keep her friends with her at all times, trying to keep everything the same, it wasn't the right thing to do. She couldn't have her entire life revolving around her friends and the fear of being abandoned. She needed to find her own reasons for living, her own reason to run. When Kath saw Mark and Nicole laughing together at the fair, she felt anger at being left behind, but after seeing how happy Mark was with her, she quite literally begins to let go of her contempt for the happiness of her friend. On the night they hung out, when she listened to Mark's desire to truly become a great piano player and join the school club, she realized how much her friend's passion inspired her. And when the two of them played the racing game together, the one thing Cathy seemed to be better than anyone else at, she saw the fire in Mark's eyes when he declared he'd finally beat her. She saw his passion, his fire, his ambition, and most importantly, she saw his joy. After seeing what Kath did, everything else just falls into place. Seeing all of her friends work so hard towards their dreams, passions, and goals made her realize that in order not to be left behind, she needed to find something to fill the fire in her own heart. She and Mark went to all these different stores in the mall to find something she could be passionate about. Her absolute admiration and love for Mark as the two of them stand under the rain, overjoyed that her best friend finally seemed happy and passionate, makes so much sense now. And by the time we see her at prom, she's found something she's interested in doing. And she knows that if she doesn't end up liking it, she'll discover something else. No matter what happens, she knows that she doesn't want to be left behind, so she'll keep trying, she'll keep struggling, and she'll eventually find her reason to live, just like her friends. Her butterfly dress is actually a representation of her life at that very moment. Although she was still kind of in her cocoon with the green pattern around her torso, the wings of the butterfly around her dress signified how she was finally beginning to spread her wings and find what she truly loves. But like she used to say, butterflies are powerless against the force of the rain, and if they don't have a place to hide, they tatter, or even die. Now, who is Cathy Portillo to me? She's a loving, supportive friend who has the tendency to act kinda goofy. She has intense love for her friends and fears change, but what she's most afraid of is being left behind by the people closest to her. But despite this fear, the passion and light that her friends have in their own hearts inspires her, and she knows that in order to truly not get left behind, she'll find out what she loves too and work towards her goals just as hard as the people she loves. And although it's hard sometimes and things can go wrong, we have to keep running so that our eyes can be in the light too. Now, not to get emotional on you all, but I am a man who struggled his entire life with never being enough. I've lived in fear my entire life that the things I do are never gonna be enough. I see the people closest to me succeed and thrive at the things they love doing, all the while I feel nothing but emptiness. Despite this emptiness, I knew how hard everyone was working to achieve their goals. I knew how hard they were working and how much passion they had in their hearts, but I was too much of a paranoid idiot to see it. The reason I spent so much time on call waiting for my friends to arrive was because I felt so scared of losing them. I wanted to show them that I'd always be there for them, that I ended up forgetting that I had my own life too. And truthfully, I took a long while off YouTube because I felt like I wasn't good enough. That it wasn't something I should be proud of despite my love for editing. I spent weeks upon weeks just doing nothing but trying to stay as close to my friends as possible, and even though I knew they wouldn't abandon me, the slightest chance that they could terrified me. But after playing Until Then and following Kath's story, it made me realize that in order for me to truly show how much I care about my friends and family, to show how much I love them, I had to live for myself. Do the things I love and work towards my own goals. All the while I can be proud and inspired by my friends' hard work, much like Kath learned. The reason why I decided to delve into her entire story before giving my own thoughts was because her fear of being abandoned and her realization about living mirrored my own fears and inspired me so much in my own life. She made me reassess how I viewed the world, and I know this may sound kinda corny, but Cathy Portillo made me want to live again. Because of her story, I began to run. I set aside my selfishness and began to try new and different things. I began taking up new hobbies and skills until I finally realized that video editing was it. It's what gave me my passion, my ambition, my light. Without Cathy Portillo and until then as a whole, I might have just abandoned this channel altogether. I know that I still have so much to learn in my life. I know I have so many hardships and struggles that lie before me, the hurdles. But if there's anything I want you to take away from this video, it's this quote from the game that I really wanted to share. No matter how much we want to, we'll never truly understand someone else. Not entirely. But that's part of understanding, isn't it? To misunderstand, to writhe, to struggle, to fail, but still, somehow, our desire to understand, to connect, to belong, to forgive, to grieve, to accept, it's gotten us further than we once thought. We place trust in ourselves, in each other, and in the end, despite everything, we get along just fine. The world hasn't ended yet. In order to live, we have to struggle. To truly find our passions, our desires, our wants, everything, we need to fight. To me now, life is having the things you struggle with. All the awkwardness of talking to new people, the fear of trying something new and just going for it. Talk to the girl you've always wanted to talk to. Try that one hobby that you've been too nervous to try. And although I know stuff like that can hurt, that feeling of awkwardness, the pain, the fear, it's just living. I have to keep growing, keep doing what I loved while simultaneously doing things that seem new to me. No matter what happens, the world hasn't ended yet. And although there are going to be some things you can never truly understand, much like how Mark couldn't understand Cathy's love for the rain, it doesn't matter so long as you try to understand. That acknowledgement that I'll never understand, but I'll try my hardest no matter what, fills my heart with so much fire and life. I may not understand you, but I love you. So thank you, Cathy Portillo, and thank you until then as a whole for showing me what it means to live again. Today, I still struggle with the fear of being left behind, but I know that in order to combat it, I need to continue running so that I can stand side by side with my friends and see the light every single day. I don't know what'll come of this YouTube channel down the line, but I can't let the fear of the unknown control me. I'll keep making what I love. I'll keep struggling to grow, to create, to move forward. Not just for my audience, but for me. Thank you all for watching.